share this PowerPoint slideshow. Should be that one. Okay. Recording. Okay. Um, it is 6 o'clock, so I'm gonna get started here. I see we have a couple people. Hopefully some more folks join us. Um, I see some familiar names. For those that don't know me, my name is Brian Mallett. I am the Genesee Foundation Open Space Manager. And then also on this call, who will participate and give a portion of the presentation is Kirk Magnuson. He is an open space technician. He's worked for Genesee for 3 seasons, and right now he is a full-time employee of Genesee Foundation on open space. So just had one more person come in. So if you don't mind, just mute yourself and remain muted. Change your Zoom name to reflect your actual name if you care to. That's mostly if you ask a question so that I can address who it is. And if you do have a question, you can put it in the chat and I'll likely address it at the end. And I also put in the chat a couple links. The first link, I'm also going to be admitting people as they come in as well. The first link is to the 2025 Open Space Management Plan, and the second link is to flyover data, a map created by the U.S. Forest Service for their aerial survey, and you'll see why I put that in there. So I'm going to get started. And again, as people join, I'm going to allow them to, I'm going to admit them. Okay, so every year I create a open space management plan in partnership with the Open Space Committee, formerly the GEM Committee. And that is a committee made up of volunteers of Genesee Foundation residents, and they meet monthly. If you're looking to get involved, reach out to the chairperson, who is Karen Deerking. The email for that is just openspacecommittee@geneseefoundation.org. We have a bunch of different committees for your community if you're looking to get involved. So I make this plan every year, and it's just to be very transparent and let residents know what we're looking to do on your open space. And I work with volunteers within the community, and then of course the board of directors to develop this. So there's an executive summary in there, and just highlight this portion. The second sentence: Genesee Foundation Open Space provides stewardship to maintain this land in a natural, healthy, ecologically diverse state that promotes resilience to threats from extended drought, wildfire, and the effects of disease, and insects on plant species, trees, other vegetation, and continued use by residents. So in that plan, we've got a bunch of great stuff that we're going to do on open space. And I've listed it out here. And the reason why I've summarized it here is that I'm going to do, for this presentation that I do every year for the community, I'm going to do it a little bit differently. I'm not going to go into the details the nitty-gritty details of this document. It's about a 20-page document. It's on our website. Again, it's posted in the chat. It's a PDF. You can download it, look at it. There's maps in there, a lot of good stuff. But for this presentation, I am going to focus on one particular thing, that is mountain pine beetles in our community. And then Kirk is going to talk about how we work with the Mile High Youth Corps every year for the past couple of years and this coming year. So that's how I'm doing this presentation a little bit different. Not going into the nitty-gritty details of that document, but instead highlighting two things that we are focusing on in open space. So to summarize that document, and what we're doing on open space this year, roughly 30 acres of wildfire mitigation. Again, the maps are in there. And forest health restoration on open space, and then a portion on private land, which is to the west of Tamarack on what's called the King Ranch. So we've got a partnership with that large landowner, and we're going to start doing some work on our western side there. We also will do and have done just about every year about 50 acres of weed management. That's mechanical and chemical. We are focusing on previous forest treatments and then other areas in open space that generally just have a lot of weeds on them. We're continuing to remove pine beetle infested trees on open space. We're also continuing to put out verbenone packets, which are pheromone packets, and I'll go into more of that in a bit. We're also doing some trail realignments. When we do trail realignments, it's to make the trail more sustainable and safer. So we tend to get some erosion on our trails, or we identify some that have some tripping hazards or something like that. So the open space crew, and then largely we have, I think we have about 20 trails volunteers. They do a lot of work, and there's a core group of about 7 volunteers within our community that do a ton of work on our trails. And they are fantastic. And if you're interested in getting more involved in our trails, we have a trails committee. Again, that's on our Genesee Foundation website. That's just, if you wanted to email them, that's trails@geneseefoundation.org. But they do a ton of work. They just love being outside, digging in the dirt, having fun. But we have some planned trail realignments on open space this year. And then in this document, I also highlight grant funding that we have had and currently have and will be using this year and the coming years, and then this 2025 through 2027, we have about $300,000. All of that is geared towards wildfire mitigation. And again, I have a lot of info in that in the document itself. So if you have questions about the specific document, please put it in the chat. I can definitely address it towards the end. But right now, we're going to jump into mountain pine beetles. Okay, so what are they? It's a bark beetle that is native to Colorado, North America in general, the western part of North America. And it burrows into trees and reproduces in trees. And when it does that, it can kill the tree. It doesn't always kill the tree. Doesn't have to kill the tree. When it goes in, it can go in, reproduce, and then leave the tree and then go reproduce some more. The beetle tends to kill the tree when there are hundreds of beetles inside that tree or repeated hits over the years. So the picture on the left is the beetle itself. It's very small, but the picture on the right is actually from northern New Mexico, just from a couple years ago. It can cause massive destruction in a forest. So in Colorado alone, in the past 2 decades, they have infested about 3.4 million acres. And if you imagine 1 acre of dense forest has between 100 to 150 trees, depending on the species, depending on the forest type. So if you just say 100 trees, you multiply 3.4 million acres by 100, and it's killing that many trees. And that's on a scale of decades in Colorado. In North America in general, in the past couple of decades, it's been about 40 million acres, and a big portion of that is in Canada, Western Canada. So they can create some significant devastation in a forest. They're native, but when they have the right conditions, which is a unhealthy forest, overly dense, one that is prone, should be burning, but isn't burning, and is allowed to grow far too dense. They can jump from tree to tree. They have a very abundant food source, and those trees tend to be more susceptible because it's an unhealthy forest. They're all competing for a limited amount of resources. The tree itself is weaker. And then, of course, you add in climate change that can significantly bolster the beetle with shorter winters, warmer winters, warmer summers, longer summers. They like that. That is their breeding ground. So that climate change adds into that as well. I'm going to go to the next slide. So how do you identify it? I talk to a lot of residents about this because it can be tricky to identify mountain pine beetles in our pine trees, specifically ponderosa pine. What I always tell people to look for is pupcorn on your trees, oozing pupcorn or frass. So that pupcorn are called pitch tubes. So the beetle bores into the tree, it goes into the living layer of the tree. It loves the ponderosa and has evolved with the ponderosa because the ponderosa has thick bark, so they can go in there and overwinter, reproduce. They can survive pretty cold temperatures. So they like to go into that thick bark. And when they're boring in, the tree is trying to pitch it out with its own natural defense, which is the pitch. It's technically not sap, but it's easy to just say it's trying to sap it out. So when you see a tree that has it's hard to find one beetle in a tree. Um, I would say myself and Kirk and the other folks that work on open space have become pretty good at spotting them. And I can spot them from pictures that residents send me. But otherwise, it's if you don't look at it all day, it's very hard to find that one beetle unless you have a tree that is hit by 100 or so beetles. It's usually pretty obvious, and that's that picture on the left where you see that oozing sap coming out. So that's the tree trying to push the beetle out. What I was saying before too, where one beetle, even 10 beetles, doesn't necessarily kill the tree because a healthy tree, it can just pitch out those beetles before they do damage, or even if they are allowed to overwinter and reproduce, the tree can pitch it out and still survive. One aspect that complicates this is blue stain fungus. So in the early 2000s, Colorado had a big bout, an epidemic of pine beetle, and then after that, you saw a lot of furniture that had blue stain. Pretty high value, like carpenters, woodworkers like to work with it. It's really pretty. So it's a fungus that rides in the mandibles of the pine beetle. And as they bore in, eat away at the tree, they are releasing that fungus. And so it's symbiotic with the beetle, but it is parasitic for the tree. So it will spread throughout the layers of the tree and basically girdle the tree, preventing it from sending resources up and resource down to the roots. So that's where if say 10 beetles aren't enough to kill it, maybe sometimes the blue stain is enough to kill it if it has the right resources and the right environment. But again, if you have 100 beetles in there, very unlikely that tree would survive. And then frass is another thing we look for. So it's just wood dust. So again, those beetles bore in there with their mandibles and push the frass behind them. And then that eventually comes out into the crevices and cracks of the tree and then to the base of the tree. So that's another good indication of a very early warning sign that there are beetles in your trees. It's just wood dust in there. Okay, so this is why I put that other link in the chat with the Region 2 Aerial Detection Survey. So the Forest Service, in partnership with Colorado State Forest Service, will fly over Region 2, and they focus a lot on Colorado because we have a lot of beetle activity in Colorado. They'll spend months in a single engine plane just with binoculars and other types of tools looking at the forest, and they're looking for what they call mortality. So they're looking for dead trees, dying trees. They also look for defoliation, which is just different insects will do different things. So beetles will generally kill the tree. Aphids or other types of insects will defoliate, like budworms, caterpillars, moths will defoliate the tree, which just means they'll eat it from the outside in. Um, so the Forest Service is looking for those types of things, flying it over, and this is what they find. Not all of these red dots are mountain pine beetle. In fact, most of them are not. A lot of it is spruce beetle, western balsam beetle, different species of beetles, different species of insects that they find, and they know from 10,000 feet up that it is this insect because they know the forest type that they're looking at when they look at this. And so zooming in, and then also adding the layer of their flight paths. So all of those pink lines are their flight paths. They just go, they make a grid across not so much the state, but the forests within the state. Um, and then zooming in more, now you can see Denver, and then to the west of Denver in the forests there. The big density to the west of us up there, a lot of that is western balsam beetle that goes after subalpine fir. This stuff on the lower part of the divide here, towards where we are, all of that is mountain pine beetle coming down here. They tend to be at lower elevations because that's where their food is. And then going in even more, so we can see Genesee right here. They only picked up one because there was a group of dead trees there, and that's off of Genesee Ridge Road to the east. It's not within Genesee Foundation. It's on a large private property over there. But as you look around, you can see Elk Meadow, places in Evergreen where there's shapes, not just triangle hits, but there's actual shapes, and they sized out the portion of mortality within the forest there. And then if you are ever driving I-70 west, you look to the left, to the south, during when you're passing Idaho Springs, you'll see a big strip of dead trees. That is mountain pine beetle right there. And then, so that's the flyover data that's from a large scale. And then we have what we do. So for the past 2 years, we've been going out on open space and talking to private landowners within Genesee and around Genesee. And we're looking for pine beetle. And so that's where I say we've gotten pretty good at just spotting that one pitch tube on that one tree. And these dots represent confirmed beetle hit trees. Anything that was on open space, so these trees that were dots on open space are gone. Over the past 2 years, including this winter, we are actively removing pine beetle infested trees on open space. So I probably should have left one as an example where somewhere somebody could walk to and see what it is, but I didn't. I also didn't want to leave that as a risk for those beetles to then spread. So generally, you can see the concentration on what I call the front side of Genesee. And so if you can see my mouse, this is Current Drive right there. So everything north of Current Drive is what I would consider the front side of Genesee. And you can see we've had a lot of hits. Any hits that we found on private property, we've communicated that with folks, and I think almost everybody has gone and removed that infested beetle tree. So that's great that we're removing them, but it doesn't mean we've gotten all the beetles. I fully expect to find more beetles when they fly in July of 2025, and then throughout the season until about September, October, when it gets too cold and they stop flying. I fully expect to find a bunch more beetle infested ponderosa pine trees within Genesee Foundation and the surrounding communities. So that's why I am honing in on this aspect of open space management. Okay, so what do we do on open space? We survey, we educate folks, we remove those infested trees, or if we can't physically get the tree out of the forest, it's just too far away from a road or trail or anything. We fell it and we debark it in place. It's pretty time consuming. So you cut it, get it on the ground, get the limbs off of it, and then put an attachment on a chainsaw that was actually meant for woodworking. And it's planer blades on the end of a chain, and debark it. So rip all the bark off of it, and it's very time consuming. But that's if we were to leave that, just fell that tree and leave it out in open space, those beetles would survive and then continue to infest the area. So we have to do something about it. And debarking is the most effective. There's other things you can do that I don't like to because it's not as effective. For example, bucking it and putting plastic on it to try and solar heat it. You don't always get the sun. Maybe it's too shaded, maybe it's too late in the season. And those beetles, if they are ambitious enough and strong enough, they will just eat through the plastic and then get to their next food source. Then of course you can spray it, but I don't like doing that, and it's not as effective. So for preventative measures, we install pheromone packets, and so that's the verbenone I was talking about. I would bet some of you talk to me about that. We buy these packets. They're little green packets. You might have seen them on open space trees. We buy them from the Colorado State Forest Service in bulk, and then we put them on open space and then sell them to residents at cost. So it's like $7 a packet. And then you just staple it to the tree. And what that does is creates kind of a cloud of about 10 feet of a pheromone that's synthetically produced that tells the beetles that this tree is full. So it's something that they would naturally produce anyhow. If there's 200 hits in this tree, the beetles are sending out this pheromone to the other beetles saying, don't come in here, go somewhere else. And so that's what it is. That's the synthesized chemical that's putting out there. So it's saying, don't go to this area. And the idea is if you put it in a dense, in with enough density, enough packets in a certain area, it creates a kind of a safe haven for the trees and tells the beetles to just keep moving on. And ideally, the beetles will then reduce their population because they're recognizing that their food source is less. The other way you can look at it is if you just put it on one big tree and then nowhere else within a couple 100 feet, then they'll just go to the next tree. And that's probably what would happen. The other thing too is if you have that one big tree and then everything else is kind of a weaker, smaller tree, you kind of want to save that one big tree. So that's also the idea behind it. And then generally all the work that we do on open space regarding forestry, we're making it a healthier forest by reducing the density. That helps the trees to become stronger and pitch out those beetles, but then also the beetles have to work harder to get to their food because it's more spread out. The beetles are very weak flyers in general. They rely on gravity. So when they land on a tree, depending on the species, but mountain pine beetle, when they land on a tree, if there's a bunch of them on there, they'll climb up. And the higher they are, the better chance their babies have, the next generation has, because they're higher, they're starting higher, and they're just using gravity to fly. And that's why also Colorado's topography is great. They'll come down, 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 down the mountain because it's easy for them. They can fly up, but they tend to take advantage of topography. Okay, what can you do on your property? Let me send me pictures if you think you've got beetles on your trees. Send me an email, brian@geneseefoundation.org. It's on the website. My cell phone's on the website. You can call our main office, talk to me about it. Walk around your property. If you've got a bunch of pine trees, that's one thing I forgot to mention. Mountain pine beetles are not going to attack your firs or your spruce or your aspen. They're only going after your pine, and pretty much we only have ponderosa pine. We do have some folks have planted bristlecone pine, pinyon pine. Those are probably at risk, not as much as a ponderosa pine because they're mountain pine beetle evolved with ponderosa pine and lodgepole pine here, but any pine tree. Remove your infested trees. If you're not sure, send me a picture. You can consult, arborists, any of those tree companies. They all know what it looks like pretty much. Um, if you do have a dense forest on your property, just general wildfire mitigation. Keep that one big anchor ponderosa pine and separate the crown by removing a bunch of other smaller trees around it. Do wildfire mitigation on your property. It generally helps the overall forest health. Hire a licensed applicator to apply permethrin to your high value pines. I'm very specific about that. I think folks should, get multiple quotes from multiple companies. Ask them if you are going to have them spray your trees. Ask them if they're a licensed applicator to do so. Herbicide. So permethrin is not a restricted herbicide. It is a general use herbicide. But if you are a contractor and commercially applying herbicide, such as permethrin, you need to have a license with the state. There's certain requirements. There's a certain way to do it. There's a certain time to do it so that it's not blowing all over the place. There's a certain measured amount, percentage that you should be of the active chemical that you're using. So that's why I say hire a licensed applicator. So the tree companies around here often do. I know, and this is not a recommendation. I'm not recommending any of these companies, but I just know that Lamb does. A bunch of folks in our community have hired Lamb Tree. They're based out of Evergreen, to do that. Magarva Tree, Splintered Forest, all those big companies, or they're local, but they're relatively big. They have licensed applicators. You can purchase verbenome packets either from Genesee Foundation or directly at the Colorado State Forest Service. They're very easy to work with. And if you want 100, no problem. They'll help you out. You just have to order them by, I think, March. You can also get them third party. If you just Google it, you'll come up with something called forestrydistributors.com. I think it's legitimate. I talked to some folks that did order from that company, and they're getting verbenone, the actual pheromone. It looks like the same packet, so I think that's legitimate as well. It's about $7 for one of the pouches. They're good for 3 to 4 months, and that's what you need. You put it out in June, and then it stays out there. You staple it to your tree, and then it's helping keep the beetle away from your high value pine tree. And you can also do both. You can combine. You can hire someone to spray it and then put verbenone on it. Reason why, again, why I'm talking about this, I think it's possible we could be at the beginning of I wouldn't say an epidemic or an outbreak, just an increase in mountain pine beetle activity. I've talked to the state entomologist. He's keeping an eye on it, and he thinks we might be at the beginning of something, especially with climate change, increasing temperatures, decreasing temperatures in winter, shorter winter, that type of thing. That trend, we're seeing more beetle activity. And then at the bottom here, I just add things about what the pheromone is, what it does, and then permethrin as well. And I put in there that no pesticide is safe. It's meant to kill. But most, again, if you hire a licensed applicator, most pesticides, including permethrin, are at a 1% solution. So it's 1% active chemical, and then maybe another 1% of what's called a surfactant. So it just sticks to whatever it's going on, and then 98% water. Generally, that's the solution. And if they're doing it under appropriate conditions. Okay, so that's mountain pine beetles. Feel free to put questions in the chat, but I'm going to turn it over to Kirk Magnuson now to talk about the Mile High Youth Corps.
Hi there. Let's see, I'm gonna pull up presentation real quick. So I think Brian gave me an introduction in the beginning, but my name's Kirk Magnuson. I'm gonna do a 5-minute overview of our partnership with the Mile High Youth Corps. And I've been working with Brian since 2020, so I've done 3 summer seasons, and then I've just gone full-time in 2024. And then I'll be leading the partnership with Mile High Youth Corps in 2025. Okay, I see, Brian, you're switching the slides. Thank you. So to give you a background on Mile High Youth Corps, they connect young adults between the ages of 18 and 24 with opportunities to develop skills in various career pathways, construction, energy and water conservation, health and wellness, and then land conservation, which is where we partner with them. And they've been in operation for about 30 years. And I think it's a really empowering organization that introduces young people to various fields that they probably wouldn't get exposure to without this organization. And it's something that I wish I would have done in high school and college. It's been really cool to work with them. And then ultimately working with these young people has given me hope in the future, and I'm very excited to see what we can do in 2025. So give you an idea of where they work in 23 Colorado counties, but predominantly along the Front Range and the Plains. Typically, their participants are Denver Metro, they're from the Denver Metro, but last year we had people from all across the country, Texas, the East Coast. So it was very interesting to see and work with these kids from all across the country. And then to give you background on our work, we've been working with them since 2019, but I've been personally involved working with the Mile High Youth Corps since 2023. So in 2023, we did 8 weeks off Tamarack Drive. And then in 2024, we did 6 weeks at Miners Mile and then 2 weeks at Chimney Creek. I was working alongside them at Miners Mile, and that was a pretty big project. And I feel like we got a lot done with them. And then in 2025, we'll be working Pine Drop Lane off Montaigne, and then 2 more weeks off Chimney Creek. So we typically start pretty slow with them in the beginning of the tenure that they have with us during the summer. So this could be anything from training along or working with chainsaws to other equipment such as our wood chipper. And then also we lead up to felling and removing flammable vegetation, trees, brush. And then the Miners Mile project, we were dragging uphill quite a bit too. So we did a lot of that. And then once we've worked through an area, we'll do post-treatment restoration, including trail maintenance. And then we do have them help us with the firewood, which seems very popular with residents. So funding, how do we pay for this partnership? We coordinate with the Colorado Department of Natural Resources. They have a co-swap grant that funds entry-level training for individuals interested in wildfire mitigation and forestry. And we work with the Genesee Fire Protection District, Genesee Foundation, and then Chimney Creek to fund these projects for the past 2 years. And these are two maps of the work that we did with them in 2024. So Miners Mile on the left, and then Chimney Creek on the right. So as you can see on the left, we worked in quite a bit of big area. Yeah, you can switch it. And this is what we're going to be doing in 2025. So give you an idea of what we've secured for 2025. We've secured 6 weeks working with the Mile High Youth Corps, valued at $69,000, and then plus an additional $15,000 towards biomass removal. So on the left is Pine Drop, and then they'll be doing more work at Chimney Creek on the right.
Thank you, Kirk. I'll just add in with the youth corps. Kirk touched on this. They come in pretty green. They do usually 1 week of chainsaw training, and they might have never touched a chainsaw previously. And the expectation with them is that they can come in fully ready to use it, maintain it, cut down trees within reason, and use a chipper, and use the tools associated with that. In our experience, mine and Kirk's, they need a couple days of more training from us, specifically working on slopes. Um, and then cutting ponderosa pine tends to be a bit larger than maybe lodgepole pine. Maybe they cut some 4 to 6 inch diameter lodgepole pine for their week, and then we're asking them to cut 8 to 10 inch diameter pines. There can be a big difference there. So we take a couple days and we work with them very closely. We do specific trainings to make sure that they are ready to work and achieve the objectives that we've set out for them. And it's been a fantastic relationship. It's a different crew every year, so different young people, which is pretty cool. We get to meet them, we get to know them, we get to work alongside them. And as Kirk mentioned, it's a pretty cool opportunity for young people to get hands-on experience, like very direct work experience that then next season they could go out and apply for working for an arborist or a fire mitigation company and say, I have this direct experience. So it's pretty darn cool. All right, that is our presentation. Since there weren't any questions in the chat, I just wanted to see if anyone had any questions. You can put your hand up or unmute yourself or anything like that. And just a reminder, in that chat, the chat box is at the bottom of your screen. I put a link to the 2025 Open Space Management Plan and a link to that aerial detection survey that I had referenced previously. I'll wait another 10 seconds or so to see if anyone has a question. Okay, I don't think anyone does. Again, I'm Brian Mallett. My email is brian@geneseefoundation.org. My email is all over the website. You can call the main office and reach out to me about anything regarding open space. You'll see Kirk working out there. He also plows your private drive as well. So you might be seeing him doing that. Thank you for attending. I really appreciate it. Carol, thank you for your comment. And I hope to see you out there. All right.